Mothers of married sons who don't like their daughter-in-laws, what's your reason? Mine was a cheating addict who strung my son along through a whole pregnancy full of lies. The baby came out a few too many shades off to pass as my son's. She even tried to take my son to court for child support, until her lawyer laid eyes on my son and told her to forget it. She stole and pawned a lot of my son's belongings along the way too. She never got clean, never got help, and has done this whole thing to yet another man since. Awful. I hope your son is doing better. People offering the perspective we've heard a million times. I believe the point of this question was to get the mother's perspective. Reddit's average age is about 23 and skews heavily male. A woman old enough to have a daughter-in-law is a huge outlier. Then that don't like their daughter-in-law cuts the field even further. Then we're asking a personal question to which Redditors are likely to dislike anyone who answers. I wouldn't hold my breath for a deluge of responses. My son married a psychobic. First, she told him she was pregnant. Then she said she was having twins. A little while later, she said she lost the babies. Then she said one miraculously survived, but when she got her period she determined that it had died too. As soon as her period was over, she told him she was pregnant again and she lost those babies too. She refused to take a pregnancy test and never once went to see a doctor, much less an OB-GYN, although I offered to pay for it. Pretty sure the goof was never once pregnant. Son caught her cheating with her ex-boyfriend and she claimed that her ex was raping her. Son called the police. The ex told the police that she traded sex for a cell phone. Then she accused my son of domestic violence. Cops didn't arrest him, though. They took her to a psychiatric hospital. Needless to say, I was happy when they divorced. But I keep a restraining order against her just to make sure she never shows back up on my doorstep. Cops didn't arrest him, though. They took her to a psychiatric hospital. Thank the gods. Wow, not one response from a real mill. I am one, but I like my deal just fine. I don't interfere, just dote a bit on the grandkids when I visit. She and my son are a good match. I feel sorry for the kids dealing with grief coming from their own moms. Me too. I have 2 daughters-in-law, and I love them both. They're both smart, kind, accomplished, and good to my sons. My daughter was once in a serious relationship with a colossal butthole, but that's another story. My grandmother hated my mother because my father was married once before and it doesn't count the second time. Basically, she preferred his ex to my mom, because divorce. I'm not making assumptions based on her behavior or things my mother said. She actually said that to me in those exact words many times, as she gave my half siblings gifts but not me. Grandpa snuck me gifts behind her back, though, because he wasn't an awful person. She was clearly a horrible person. Not an average mill who just dislikes her dill. That's awful. The mother-in-law hate here is scary. I'm a mother of 3 sons. One of them is married, and until very recently, I absolutely adored my daughter-in-law. She was the daughter I didn't have. They gave me the most amazing granddaughter. My daughter-in-law did, however, bring a level of drama to our lives that we were not accustomed to, and that was hard to adjust to. Being a household of primarily males, there just was not much drama. The dill is 9 years older than my son. They started dating when my son was 19. I was very concerned about the age difference, but I always treated her respectfully and with kindness. They are amidst divorce now, and I'm not thrilled with her behavior over the past 6 months. My reason is that she knew she was dating a very young man, and they knew when they decided to marry and have a child, that the young man was still quite young. My dill remains flummoxed that my son, who is 23 now, hasn't turned into a 30-year-old adult, like she is. Some red flags did go off for me as I observed her own relationship with her mother. They were quite harsh with each other, but I tried not to let that affect my acceptance of her, and she became an integral part of our family. Nonetheless, she has treated my son poorly, and I no longer like her. It has nothing to do with competing with her. It has to do with how she is now treating him and us. This potential mother-in-law is open to any potential daughter-in-law or same-sex partner any of my boys become involved with. I want my sons to have loving relationships in their lives, and I would never do anything to hinder whoever they choose to share their lives with. Not all mothers-in-law are horrible people. I am glad to hear this perspective. I often hear a lot of story in our relationships or are just normal, and since it is one person telling the story, daughter-in-law, I can't help but think it could be biased somehow. In our own perspective, we are always right. Difficult to know when the story is exaggerating or some points are forgotten. I was with a woman I thought would be my wife. We talked about it, looked at rings, etc. She was Catholic. I'm not. Her mom hated my guts because I wasn't Catholic. Her mom would send her emails monthly saying, "He isn't Catholic. He's not rich and never will be. Find yourself a rich Catholic boy so you don't have to work, etc, etc." The mom got to the point where she spread rumors to my ex's friends about me. So now the mom and a bunch of her friends don't like me. So she left me in January. I've barely spoken to her. I got in touch with her the other day and told her how badly I want her back. Turns out, she's got herself a wealthy Catholic boyfriend now. 3 years being with her and being broken up for 4 months. I still dream about her every night and she moved on a few weeks after the split. Feels bad, man. Honestly, if she moved on that quickly, she moved on a long time ago. My grandma hated my uncle's wife. I think it was pure jealousy. Grandma was a bit of a controlling type and hated being replaced. She treated my uncle like a child. Sadly, he died of cancer while still pretty young. Grandma tried to rewrite the obituary and managed to pee off my uncle's wife and children for a very long time. My mom hated my brother's first wife. There were plenty of good reasons. She was an addict, a liar, and a cheater, among other things. My mill didn't hate me, but she didn't love me either. She resented me and wanted to be the only woman in my husband's life. It was obvious that she would have felt like that about anyone. I did not like my son's first girlfriend. She seemed very disinterested in everything but herself and her phone. I didn't really know her well or for long, but struggled to see what he liked about her beyond her looks. She was pretty. Lots of people here. I bet family reunions are fun. I know why my mom doesn't like my sister-in-law. She's unpleasant and mean. Every time we went to visit, she will make sure there's at least one fight. With my brother, at least one yelling, drag-out fight. So now every time we're trying to enjoy a visit, it's tense because we're waiting for the inevitable. Watching my nephew watch his parents scream at each other is the worst part. My brother went from doing okay, having friends and a sense of humor, and some crap, to now being overweight, unhappy, and having nothing to do on the weekends but drink and watch TV, which he then picks a fight about. He's so wrapped up in it even when I try to get him alone for a while, it takes him a while to unwind. Otherwise, he puts me down so he doesn't feel awful. It sucks. I used to be best friends with my brother, and Ma knows it too, and hates her as much as she can. Mainly, it's pity because it's clear she's a miserable person. Try getting them to married counseling so at least your brother can try to leave her. That's horrible and I'm sorry to hear that. I love both my daughters-in-law now, but at one time, my oldest was very serious and talking marriage with a girl that no one I knew liked except my son. She was really arrogant with no particularly good reason for being so. She didn't appear to like anyone else either. She was just very bad-natured. I was upset for my son but also relieved when she broke it off. He'd hit a bad patch and was out of work so she started seeing someone else. Fun story time. My co-worker and I both have terrible mills. We always complain to each other because we got it and it's hard to talk to your husband about it because they clearly love their parent and their parent treats them well. One day she turns to me and says, "I know I am going to hate my future daughter-in-law because no matter who she is or what she does she will never be good enough for my baby." My response: "So basically you want to be your mother-in-law?" Her eyes got really big and she was horrified that she would act the way our Mill would without even knowing who he was possibly ever going to meet. He was in middle school at the time and years away from being that serious with anyone. I am pretty sure that is the mentality of my own mother-in-law. I have a relative who hates their daughter-in-law because she wouldn't allow her husband to donate his bone marrow to save his brother who had leukemia. Her logic being one of your sons is already screwed up. Why would you potentially want to screw up the second one? I'm assuming because he was supposed to marry a woman and give her grandbabies, but instead is marrying a man who doesn't even want to adopt for the foreseeable future. Kids are never guaranteed. Many straight couples struggle with infertility. If you make him happy, that should be enough. My Mill is a fundamentalist Christian who pretends to like me, but I know if I broke up with her son she would be more than overjoyed. Over the past 10 years she has said and done things that show her true colors. Myself and her ex-pastor son are atheists. His parents are relentless and creative in their tactics for us to return to the fold. She has said some incredibly rude things about non-Christians. What she doesn't consider is this is one of the many reasons why we don't believe or participate. Okay, so I don't like fruit pies. Big freaking whoop. This became a big deal to her. When we first started dating she told my so she's not like us. When he questioned her about it she told him it was because I don't like pie. He basically rolled his eyes at her. Yeah. So for every birthday for 6 years she'd bake me an apple pie. I'd politely choke down a piece. And she would stand smiling her freaking face off and then say, oh right, you don't like pie. You shouldn't feel like you need to eat that for my benefit. My saving grace is I'm a clean eater now, over 60 pounds down, and I don't eat sugar, meat, flour, etc. This has also created its own issue. I'm very appreciative when we are invited for a meal, even though I now have to bring my own food. She will not stop putting marshmallows on the sweet potato, sugar in the peas, bacon fat in her salad dressing, heaps of butter and sour cream in the potatoes, and then complains to me she can't seem to get to the same weight as me. She's got 30 plus years on me and every time she sees me she asks my current weight, and when I tell her I don't know she'll pout and grumble under her breath about it. B. I work out every freaking day and I basically eat vegetables. This is not freaking easy, and it's also not for everyone. I don't judge anyone for their weight, that's your crap to deal with. I have plenty of my own baggage I'm lugging around. She's actually grabbed my hips and jiggled me like a side of beef trying to guess. Don't get me wrong. I really do love and appreciate her and what she has done for us. I feel that she's made zero attempt to get to know me. She basically knows where I work and where I live, but has never asked me about my life, ever. She has no freaking clue that both my brothers are gay. Haha. For some reason, the apple pie thing pisses me off even more than the religion insults. My step-mill hates me because we have the same first, middle and last name. My real mill died but I felt she was the only one to try to understand me. I really like my son's wife. She's nice. I think I'm gonna buy the exact same model. I'm curious if anyone will come here, as a mother who dislikes her daughter-in-law, and admit it for anything other than I knew she was trash. She cheated and broke his heart kind of dislike. You know, a situation where she was clearly validated in the end. My mill would dig a grave and bury herself in it before consciously admitting, even to herself, she doesn't like me and makes sure I know it at every chance. There's just such a cognitive dissonance in the way she thinks of herself and the way she truly is, and I bet that's quite common. It's common for every human everywhere. We all know the motivators and justifications for our actions. Whether those are universal or not is another story, but everyone is the hero of their own story. Even Hitler thought he was a good guy doing the right thing. My mother hates my wife of 9 years and always has. My wife is half Hispanic, had a son from a previous marriage, had a father who was an ex-con and feels that my wife was taking me from her. I'm the only child who lived near them. She would go as far as to invite me and my wife's daughter to do things and not my wife and stepson. My father wasn't much better either. Needless to say that I had to cut ties with my parents. I'm also much happier since then. My mill hates me. She'll talk crap behind my back but try and be nice as pie to my face. How do I know this? Because it's my husband she talks to. According to Mill, even though we all started out on council estates, because they bought their own home, I'm not the right class. Because I have a degree, I'm taking the pee out of my husband's intelligence. Because I'm 7 years older than my husband, I've obviously brainwashed him into abandoning her. Because I don't make a ton of money, I'm a gold-digging W who only wants him for his money, despite him being depressed, jobless and suicidal when I met him, and because I have tattoos, I've obviously got massive issues. My husband eventually got told that he should move back home with them and as a sop, he could still be in a relationship with me. He told her that if she made him choose, she'd lose. She's been coldly civil to me ever since. My mom hated my wife and I don't know why. My wife is beautiful, smart, kind and has never done anything to my mom. I mean frankly my wife is way too good for me. She's always been nice and a great mom to her grandkids. I guess my mom had this way of making these kind of backhanded comments. I never noticed it and kind of dismissed my wife about it for the first 5 years of our marriage. One day she admitted that she didn't like my wife and that was it. Haven't talked to my family in 2 years now. Best decision I've ever made. I'm surprised you dismissed your wife for 5 years. That would never be allowed in my relationship. However, my mill is terrible enough to everyone that my spouse stopped talking to her about 12 years ago and totally cut all communication about 6-7 years ago. It is not worth it. My mother doesn't like my sister-in-law too much because she's a bit high maintenance, not in the material things sense, and my mother had wished for an easier life for my brother. My sister-in-law isn't evil or anything. She's nice but has a difficult personality at times. My mother hates my wife and she gives different reasons why. She's Mexican and probably marrying me to stay in the US. Not true, she's a natural born American. She's belligerent and argumentative. She stands up to people, including my mother. And now it's because she stays at home and I have to work. My wife has health issues and can't work. I always assumed the real reason is because my wife makes me happy and my mom actually hates the idea of me being happy. My mill sees me as competition. She doesn't like that she doesn't have control of her son anymore and that he's allowed to make his own decisions. I don't play her games or feed into her narcissism. And she hates everyone, unless she can benefit from them. So there's that. That was my mother. She accused my wife of changing me. I wasn't as fun anymore. All that really changed was that I was growing up. You can't invite 30-year-old me over and expect 15-year-old me to show up. My mother-in-law never liked me much. She didn't hate me, but I am pretty sure she thought her son was better than me. Plus, to her, if you aren't blood, you aren't family. She had pictures all over her house of her other kids, of my husband, but not one single picture of me. I spent 20 years trying to get her to like me, and then suddenly I just didn't care anymore. I was pleasant, helped out when needed but just did not give a rat's butt. Made everything much easier. The thing I'm proudest of is that my kids have no idea. She's dead now and I have never said a bad word about her to them. They loved her. But at her funeral I was told to go in with the rest of the people, that this part was just for family. I think it is awesome of you to not tell your kids. My mom talked a lot about our family, in a bad way. That gave me reasons to not trust them as a kid, even if they were great relatives and nice to me. My mother hates my fiance simply because he is a recovering H addict. The fact that I am one too seems to make no difference. What's more, his family is so lovely to me and it makes me really sad that he can't have the same experiences with my family. Not the mom, but the witness. My brother married a woman just like my mom. Overly emotional, manipulative, and judgmental. They visit with the kids, and my mom tries to parent their kids better than they do, makes suggestions, etc. My mom hates my brother's wife because she doesn't take any of those suggestions, and just brushes them off. It is exactly why my mom does when anyone tries to suggest anything to her. My mom hates my brother's wife because they're the same person. My mother doesn't like my brother's wife because said mother happens to be a narcissistic butthole who wanted him to pick her as the number one in his life. My mom was hesitant at first because oh no, same sex, how am I gonna get grandbabies? SHHH mom. It's okay. You have 2 more chances with my siblings but also none of us are you grandbabies. She also seems to struggle with her perception of my partner's intelligence and anxiety. On the other hand, my partner's mother constantly be about how I lack a real job. I am physically disabled and autistic, making most typical entry-level jobs heck if not impossible. I do the budgeting and whatnot. Partner is dyscalculic learning disabled, which ties into my mom's issue regarding smarts. We aren't on benefits, and I do art as well. She knows all of this, but that's not good enough, of course. We work really well together. For the record, almost a brains and brawn sorta deal. Our strengths and weaknesses suit each other nicely. So one of my sons got me to make an account quickly to give an actual perspective from a mother-in-law. For me, I don't like my other son's new wife because she's a lazy bee, to put it bluntly. They're both 26 now and she doesn't lift a finger to help do any housework, laundry etc. She seems to expect him to do everything for her and it feels like he's a doormat to me in that respect, even though he probably doesn't see it that way. You can go into their house and there'll be piles of dirty dishes just lying around unwashed and it's disgusting. Relationships should mean shared responsibility, but she doesn't do her part. On top of that, it's like she treats our home like hers and just makes herself at home around our pool and hot tub. She uses them more than we do and we live here. The only good thing I have to say is she doesn't seem to be after him for money. We're a well-off family and he's making £100k plus at 26 and should be making £500k by 35-40 at this rate. And she builds up more savings than he does despite earning 4x more. Honestly, I just wish she would do more to help out. Even just offering would be nice, even if we don't need it, but as long as they're happy I keep out of it. Not a mill, but I'll reply on behalf of my mom. My brother got married 6 months ago. When he proposed, he knew his wife less than a year. They were each other's rebound, and they moved so quickly. Now there's nothing wrong with that. To each their own. So we tried to get to know her and get along with her. She is a very judgmental person. My parents are divorced, so she would talk crap about one parent to the other, and vice versa, all while being fake nice. Also, she twists around a lot of things we've said to alienate my brother from us. So once they started wedding planning, we ended up having a fallout, and I didn't speak to my brother for almost a year. To this day, we're civil, but we don't speak unless we necessarily have to. It makes me very sad, but I want him happy, so I keep them at a distance to avoid any conflict. Also, my sil makes zero effort to befriend my mom. She calls my stepmother her mill, and doesn't contact my mom. That would make sense if my mom was a crazy person, but she has tried and tried, so she finally gave up. I think the title should read, "Why can't you cut the effing king umbilical cord and stop being so passive aggressive towards my wife?" My whole family hated my brother's, now ex-wife. She was crazy jealous and insecure. If he was a minute late from work, he was cheating. He's a football nut, but she actually accused him of only watching it because of the cheerleaders that they barely show. He had tons of comic books that he had collected since he was a kid, and she threw them all out one day while he was at work because it was pornography. She once got angry when they came over to my mom's house because I Love Lucy was on and Lucy and Ethel were in bathing suits, like black and white, 1950s bathing suits. She refused to work because they had 2 young boys, but she would drop them off at her mom's and go shopping all day, and she completely controlled their banking account. Complete psycho. I can answer the other way. I'm a daughter whose mother doesn't really like my husband. His personality doesn't jive with hers, which I could see at first because he can be a bit tightly wound, where she's really laid back. But I guess she won't admit that her daughter is also tightly wound and they're a great match. In addition, he didn't go to college, his family isn't as solid as ours, and his upbringing was not as good. We also eloped, not in the pregnant teenager sense of the word, but we didn't have a wedding, which she seems to blame him for, and that kind of seals the deal on her dislike of my husband and opinion of my marriage. She doesn't really ask about him, and when I mention him, her answers are curt and seem bothered. We don't currently live in my home state, which I am hoping to change very soon. As long as she doesn't make her unwarranted opinions known, and is able, on some level, to fake it, we'll be fine. That's not ideal, but it's likely how it'll be. Her mind is made up about him, and the things she said about us before we married aren't things I will ever fully heal from. She has a way, however, of subtly saying things without saying things, and if that's been going on with my family, we will have to address it. My mom doesn't like my brother's girlfriend, probably life partner, because they fight and scream at each other, and my parents constantly threaten to kill herself and everyone in the family. She has stabbed my brother a couple times. She supports his drug habit, and because she is a prostitute. If it counts towards anything, I'm a 20-year-old male and I have been in a relationship with my GF for about 3 years now. I assumed my mother liked her, as she hasn't ever said anything negative to me about her until recently. I recently found out my brother is having a baby with his GF of 5+ years. I was moving house and my mother was helping me. My GF doesn't live with me, so she arrived and starting being quite outspoken and a total B because I was too busy to do stuff with her on her day off. When she stormed out of the house, my mother stated, "Please do not get her pregnant. I thought you would have been done with her by now. I think your mother might be the MVP. She kept quiet and wasn't ever nasty, but she knew it all along." If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.